And I assume it's going live. There we go. Yes, it's live. Hi, everyone. It is hour number 2 of Markna. Really quickly, because I didn't talk about it in the first hour, the reason we're doing a Markna is because there was no Macna this year, and I found that to be unacceptable. So I decided to put together this 24-hour event, and we are in hour number 2. Our next guest is going to be Steve Hartter, and he works at the Georgia Aquarium as an associate curator. He actually takes care of specific areas we're going to let him get into. I want to put him on the screen with me here. This is there. Look, you look good. Do you sound good?
Yeah, how's it going?
That's perfect. Okay, great. And I've got a presentation ready. This one should go better than the last one because we're not doing it like we did last time. So I'm excited to throw it on the screen. But can we just kind of get to know you for a minute or so before we start the presentation?
Yeah, so I've been a reef aquarium hobbyist for about 30 years. That's where it all got started. So from there, I worked to kind of pay my way through college. I worked at a pet store in both high school and college up in Michigan, where I'm from. I went to Michigan State University, got my zoology degree, and then kind of entered the public aquarium field. I worked down at Florida Aquarium in Tampa, Florida,
Nice.
for a few years prior to coming up to Atlanta, Georgia. This was kind of my dream job up here, maintaining this beast of an exhibit that we have here. And I actually applied right out of college. I never got a call back. Got a few years of experience, and then they suddenly wanted me. So I
Nice.
was lucky enough to get the job up here and help grow this system to what it is today.
That is awesome. So listen, I do want to tell you I love, capital Love, love the Georgia Aquarium. It is one of my favorite aquariums to visit. I've probably been there 4 or 5 times. I always go there and take pictures and videos. I never release them. It's buried on my hard drive. I'm the worst when it comes to that because I'm just so immersed in what you guys have done there. I am so amazed at what you're able to accomplish, and the whale sharks are my absolute favorite.
Yeah, it's amazing in this kind of landlocked city what we have here, but we're able to, with just a bunch of filtered Atlanta city water and lots of instant ocean salt,
Yeah.
create these amazing habitats. Everything
Yeah.
from a 6.2 million gallon whale shark system to our reef aquarium that's 164,000 gallons. It's not so small itself. So
That's
it,
huge.
it is amazing workplace. I sometimes get kind of numb to it. I'll walk across the whale shark exhibit, and it's
And you don't even
basically a
look. You just
football
walk
field.
past.
Yeah, it's just another day in the office. But then I bring my friends up here and just watching their jaws drop when they see
Yeah.
some of our systems. Pretty amazing.
No, it's amazing. Just want to ask you this, and you probably can't even answer the question. Have you ever considered a different salt? Can you even do
Uh,
it?
yeah, so we've been working with Instant Ocean for years. They give us a great deal, and it's actually a great salt. So
Yeah.
we're lucky enough. Atlanta city water is really good. It's got low TDS.
Yeah.
We filter that out with our RO system for
Hmm.
sensitive animals like our reef. But
Yeah.
we've had no issue growing pretty much anything in Instant Ocean salt.
Right.
At home, I do use Tropic Marin, but
Oh, it's interesting.
that's just a little nostalgia. Back when I worked at the pet store, we used Tropic Marin, so
Right.
I wanted to go back to that. I guess I spend a little bit more money on it.
Yeah,
But
you just know with hobbyists, they're always like, oh, this is the best one. This is the best one. I love this one. Oh, I'm switching to this one. I hate that one. And I was wondering on a scale of your size, do you ever say, oh my God, I hate. But you can't say that. I don't want to say anything negative about Instant Ocean. I'm just curious if the thought ever comes up with you guys. You're like, hmm.
yeah, I mean, realize in huge systems like ours, we can do very little water changes.
Yeah.
Actually, in our big whale shark system,
Yeah.
we pretty much do zero water changes because one, it's difficult to dump all that water down the drain. It
Yeah.
can damage the biological filtration of the water, the waste treatment centers.
Sure.
Then on top of that, to do anything meaningful would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you can't just drop the water because it puts so much pressure on the windows. It can cause the seams to have
Interesting.
issues.
That's a logical. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. All
So
right.
yeah, yep.
Do you want me to put your presentation up? Get you
Yeah, let's
going?
go ahead and get started. Some of it will be review since we already talked about it.
All
But
right. We are ready.
yeah, my presentation is titled "A Mega Reef in Atlanta." So we can go to the next slide. And this stuff we already kind of talked about, but you can see that's a few month old picture of my system at home.
Hmm.
Much smaller than what I deal with at work, 150 gallon system. just kind of some of the corals and animals I like. I know that
Yeah.
you probably can see some xenia in there. Don't worry though, it's the bally giant variety, and I have various tricks I use to keep it from spreading everywhere. And then I love to travel and scuba dive with my wife. So you can see we traveled to Indonesia, and we're going there again in February. So
Do you need a dive buddy besides your wife? I mean, I'll just tag along.
that trip that I'm going on, I'm actually leading a trip to Raja Ampat, and we're
Uh,
taking a group of donors to there. So I'm lucky
wow.
enough that that is work for me. I'm going for 10 days
Yeah.
on a live aboard with a masseuse, and I get to be the naturalist on the boards
I
on
was going to
board.
actually
So
do something very similar, but unfortunately, COVID wiped out our trip. We couldn't do it. I'd been paying for it for a year, and we couldn't even get into the country, or Indonesia, the area we weren't allowed in.
this was a 2020 trip. So after 4 years, it's actually going. But
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to go in 2019 as well. So.
Your reef is really pretty, but it's on the lower part of my screen. I don't, you're kind of. Unfortunately, these are chopped off a little bit. Looks like I can't move it upward. Nope. All right.
So yeah, then kind of a review. We have lots and lots of different displays. We get about 2.5 to 2.8 million people through our doors every year,
Yeah.
and we can expose those people to all the wonderful habitats and give them a glimpse and show them kind of animal ambassadors and ecosystems that represent the natural habitat. So we have a huge predatory shark exhibit, 1 million gallons, our whale shark exhibit, very large jelly systems. Then, of course, our mega reef that I'm going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
So we can go to the next slide. And this is kind of a walk through our tropical diver gallery. This is where, I don't know if the video will play on this one. Um, this is a couple minute walk through here.
Okay.
And we have, within this gallery, we have lots of different enclosures. This was put together by our PR team. But if, as you walk through the entrance, you come about and this used to be our garden eel habitat, but it's currently a volcano exhibit, and it has lots of just larger kind of triggers and puffers and fish like that
Mm-hmm.
that we can't necessarily display in a live coral habitat.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to get into some of our jelly exhibits. This is a 6,000 gallon sea nettle display
Mm-hmm.
with our Japanese sea nettles. Those are really uh, actually one of our most popular animals in the aquarium are jellies. They rate very highly in any of our surveys.
Mm-hmm.
This is our rhizostome system, about 400 gallons with mystigius in it. It actually has been transitioned out to marbled jellies, but we'll switch species on these jelly systems pretty frequently.
Do you?
And then also in this gallery too, we have a large moray eel habitat. So the kind of the stars of the show here are the green morays, but we also have a variety of different smaller species that are separated by kind of ship compartments. This is meant to replicate a submarine that's been damaged and turned into a wreck. We have lionfish that are non-native to the Caribbean ecosystem, but are present now that are also in this habitat. But just a variety of different fish in there.
Yeah.
Those moray eels are awesome. We can actually we've trained them to come to the surface. They swim through tubes, and then we can potentially do any medical procedures we need to because we desensitized them to that through animal training. So it's amazing what you can do with some of these fish.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as you wrap around that dark corner, you get into our main reef. So it's very, very dark, and then you get hit with all the lights from this system and the natural skylight. And you can see there were some divers in there at that point in time doing some surface supply diving, which we'll talk about.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple thousand different colorful Indo-Pacific fish. This is back to that other habitat. They kind of spliced it in. That is not in a reef tank.
Yeah.
But it kind of goes back and forth and then back to some of our corals. Um, and then once you get past the reef, we get in other systems. This was an old kind of tired artificial display that we added Tubastria or Tubastrea coral to.
Mm-hmm.
Sun coral are amazing. You can keep them in a variety of habitats. They're actually really easy to keep. They reproduce through brooding, and you'll find the little planula in the water that will settle out and turn into new colonies.
That's
And
so
then we have
great.
everything else that supplement this gallery. Little flamboyant cuttlefish.
Yeah.
These guys are eating live grass shrimp. They're amazing. You can
And
watch them
those are
change
guys are
colors.
like between 1 and 3 inches long, right?
Yeah, they're tiny, tiny
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
guys,
Yeah.
and they're in a probably about 150 gallon habitat that actually currently is a peacock mantis shrimp. since this video was taken
Okay.
with some live coral. So you'll get a glimpse there of some of our smaller, what we call jewel tanks
Yeah.
that kind of round out the
Yeah.
gallery. And then we get into the garden eels that they don't take a good look at in that pop-up window are some of our originals. We received them in 2005, and they're still alive today in that display. They were the ones that were transitioned out of that big first habitat when you first walk into that gallery. So
Yeah.
lots of different variety to kind of represent all the tropical animals throughout the different coasts. So we like to represent all the different oceans, but mostly we do focus on the Indo-Pacific in this gallery.
Yeah. Everything looks great. This is a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's our PR team was wonderful in putting this together. So we do have, of course, a Nemo display with some bubble tip anemones and various clownfish.
That might be the end of this.
Yep, we can go to the next slide here. So we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into the actual next one here. This is the same video.
My finger got a little excited. There's a slight lag of what I'm doing here. Okay.
So yeah, our Pacific Barrier Reef, which is what we'll talk about for the remainder of the presentation, is one of the largest in the world. It's the fourth largest, designed by a group led by Dr. Bruce Carlson. It's 49 feet by 47 feet by 18 feet. So I remember when I thought a 50-gallon aquarium was huge to me growing up and in high school when I had one in my bedroom. But this thing is absolutely massive, 164,000 gallons.
Yeah.
It was designed and modeled after a Solomon Island reef, and I'm going to show you the rock inspiration.
Okay.
But it does contain animals from across the Indo-Pacific. And it's divided into three main sections: the reef wall, the lagoon, and the mangrove forest. The reef wall is what you see as a typical guest.
Correct.
And then if you're lucky enough to take a behind-the-scenes tour,
Yeah.
you'll see the other portions, the lagoon and the mangrove forest.
Yeah.
So next slide, please.
There's the
And then
reef.
this is some of the video. I'm sorry that the video is a little bit blue, but you can play this video here.
Okay.
But you can see it's grown in quite a bit. I've been lucky enough to watch it grow since 2010 when I first arrived at the Georgia Aquarium. And it's been a lot of hard work to get it to this point, but some of the colonies are massive. I mean, the monopora that's on the right-hand side is 8 feet approximately in diameter. So it's hard to get a sense of scale until you see a yellow tang that's probably 7 inches long swim across the colony. So it is an absolutely massive system. With these, you can kind of see the seam in the window.
Yes.
Unfortunately, when you have these big acrylic panels, and this one is curved, you have to kind of fuse multiple panels together. So it does have a little bit of a seam, but it is all very thick acrylic. It's the only thing that can handle the pressure put against it.
Right.
About 18 feet deep, 49 feet long, and it's meant to allow you to get super close with that curved window to the corals to see the delicate details of them, while still providing lots of surface area with the fish. And there's like a wave that crashes over your head. So it's a really amazing aesthetic effect that this system has. And yeah, you get in the next one, and then it's another video that kind of pans over.
Got it.
And see typical aquarium occupants that you might see in a home aquarium: acroporas, turbinarias, monoporas. There's some giant clams in there. Mostly stony corals. There's some Magnifica anemones that we got from our good friends up at the Long Island Aquarium. But just numerous corals in there. We utilize that same technique that Michelle was talking about with planting clusters. That works great in even home aquariums as well as large exhibits like this, where we'll plant lots of different frags of the same type next to each other, and they fuse together in big colonies. This is me dipping my iPhone inside the aquarium.
Wow.
I'm lucky enough to be able to do that and see some of the fish in there. Most of these fish were introduced between 2005 and 2011. So many of them are over a decade old.
That's great.
But you can see you're looking across 50 feet, and you can see straight across it because of the ozone and the other things that we do to filter this system.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, I want to mention, because you didn't, so the front of that tank is actually 2 feet below the floor. So when you walk up to it, there's a drop off in front of your feet. It goes down a little bit more, and it gives you that nice full view approaching the tank. It's really pretty.
Yeah, one of the things that actually I would, if I could, um, uh, going back on it
Yeah.
and try to redesign it,
Right.
I would love if that floor dropped off even further than that.
Uh-huh.
One of the challenges that we have with this system is that you're viewing most of the corals from the bottom side of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking up at it rather than the down view where most of the coral pigment is. So
Yeah.
it can be a little bit challenging from an aesthetics standpoint, and it is mimicking a wall rather than like a
Yeah.
upper reef slope or reef flat. So the
Yeah,
coral
exactly.
coverage, there's lots of areas that don't have corals because it's just so steep and there's overhangs in there.
Yeah.
So we can go, if you're able to the next slide, and I'll show some of the other parts of the habitat.
Okay.
And this is our lagoon area and our mangrove forest. So there's numerous clams that are in here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you can see the video there.
Yep.
There's some of the first batches when ORA released I think it was probably 2018, where some of these guys came in as little 2-inch individuals.
Aw, that's
They just
awesome. Because they're
and
huge
they've
now.
grown, yeah, they've grown into
Wow.
pretty large clams. There's blue spot. There's a mom and her
Yeah.
daughter in there, and
Oh.
then live red mangroves for the most part in there.
Oh, that looks so
Um,
good. And this one you can walk
so
around in and work in.
Yeah, this area is only about 3 feet deep at its
Right.
deepest portion, so
Yeah.
it's quite a bit shallower than some of the other areas. We can go to the next slide here.
I'm trying. Okay.
And then, yeah, this is a little walkthrough through the back, and we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at various, the lighting on the deep end, and then it's
Yep.
separated. Then you see that lagoon area,
Yep.
and then the mangrove portion of it. So
Yeah.
the mangrove area and the lagoon area actually don't have much in the way of artificial lighting. It's all provided by a skylight.
Mm-hmm.
There is one. We do have a Kessel that's illuminating this portion right here.
Okay.
It's the W2K fixture.
Mm-hmm.
But the majority of that's going to be kind of a work in progress as we add lighting to this back area so we can really allow it to reach its full potential,
Right.
just as we did with changing the lights around in the deeper, the reef wall portion. So,
Yeah.
um, but a really, really cool area. Lots of sea anemones, both bubble tips and magnificas and carpets,
Mm-hmm.
the different clownfish, the stingrays, and then the clams. So this area is open to our education groups as well as our behind the scenes tour.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go to the next slide. And then you'll see there, that's a photo that Bruce Carlson took, and that shows the inspiration for the rock work. It's really
Ah.
difficult to get a picture from the front side where you'd see that
Yeah.
because the lights kind of block it.
Yeah.
But that rock work looks exactly like that Solomon Island picture there.
Yeah.
But of course, the underwater scene is different at this
Yeah.
point. But that was kind of the inspiration that Bruce had. Bruce did a lot of field work and research in the Solomon Islands.
Yeah.
So it's a very amazing area, part of the Coral Triangle, and that's really what we're trying to mimic. If we could get even a fraction of the beauty of this habitat and show our couple million guests that walk through how beautiful this reef ecosystem is and what we potentially can lose if we don't protect it, we're doing our jobs. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We can go to the next slide.
Is that image on the right? You're going to discuss more about that part with the water going in. Is that coming up?
Yeah. I'm going to get more into the maintenance as
Okay.
well as the filtration.
Got it.
So these are some pre-opening photos here,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see there's an FRP framework
Mm-hmm.
with kind of a skin that goes up, a fiberglass skin insert that goes over it. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
hollowed out space behind the reef wall,
Yeah.
and then there's pipes that go through it that provide a lot of the water motion.
Yeah.
But most of our quote rock work is actually a fiberglass wall, and then they did create planters that hold artificial live rocks. So we worked with Walt Smith to create kind of planters or pockets that hold 5,000 kilograms of Fiji cultured live rock in those pockets. So we did, to start out, use a lot of artificial decor. Since then, we've cut most of that the artificial coral out of there. So that's been a work in progress, and it's actually quite difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get in there with saws, and it's always fun when we're doing our dive shows, and we'll be working behind the people talking about how you need to be really careful with coral and not
Yeah.
step on it. And we'll be hacking coral behind there, behind the dive show, and
Right.
of course that gets lots of looks. But it's been a definite work in progress over the years.
Sure.
We can go to the next slide here. And the water motion is provided by what we call the side-by-side system. So you can see the pipes that are in there. Those are driven by four 20 horsepower pumps,
Hmm.
and they kind of switch from side to side. So
Yeah.
it every minute or so it switches from one side to the next,
Wow.
and that alternate flow kind of creates the chaotic turbulence that we want in there. We also do have dump buckets, and those are synchronized with the crescendo of the music, and they dump
Right.
about 1,500 gallons of water every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
and
what I want to
in
talk
addition to
about.
that, we recently, like I said, this is constantly a work in progress.
Yeah.
As you guys all know, it's a chess game.
Yeah.
We're constantly, as the corals grow, we're adding more. So we did add six Abyss pumps, the AFC 400s, the flow
Wow.
cannons, and
Yeah.
those add, I think each of those does like 58,000 gallons per hour of
Wow.
water flow. So those have been added as well. So this is the closest when you dive in the system to diving on a natural reef.
Right.
It takes a higher skill set
Yeah.
to stay put and not crash into corals because of how
Yeah.
much water motion is in there.
I
Um,
bet.
so um, it is pretty impressive. We can go to the next slide. Um, it's difficult to see, and these are older readings, but basically we'll have readings that are pretty typical of most reefs, anywhere
Hmm.
from 10 to 15 centimeters per second, all the way. You can see that top left, that flow reading of 370 centimeters per second
Yeah.
was taken close to an outflow of the side-by-side motion.
Correct. Yeah.
And uh, it's a little bit challenging because they are embedded in the rockwork to hide them,
Yeah.
but that puts some of those outflows very close to coral planters.
Yeah.
So, no coral is going to survive near that 370 centimeters per second. So we have to kind of plant away from it.
Yeah.
But then in addition, we also added the biz in front of the reef wall
Hmm.
so that it can kind of blow over the reef rather than, kind of blow through it
Right.
like the side by side water motion does.
Yeah.
So we can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Um, our lighting has been a constant work in progress. We started out with 2,000 watt metal halides that were away from the reef.
Yeah.
Actually, some of them caught fire. We had to get rid of that system and use more traditional 1,000 watt metal halides, like some of the commercial facilities might be used to.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, just like all of you guys out there might be experiencing, the availability of metal halide components has dwindled, and it's very challenging now to source the lamps, the ballast, the fixtures themselves. So we've been gradually transitioning over to LEDs. Now, with LEDs in commercial settings, they're not as much of a known quantity. Of course, we can grow any coral under LEDs like radions and skies and some of the other ones, the Phillips coral cares and things like that.
Yeah.
But you can't just put 4,000 radions over an aquarium this size.
Right.
And we have a very niche market. There's not many people out there with 164,000 gallon reef aquariums. So we're such a limited market that not very many people cater to us.
Yeah.
So we're still trying to basically do R&D and figure out a system that works with a system this large in surface area as well as this deep. So we've been using a lot of the max spec LED floodlights, and in fact, we have a test section that is entirely these LEDs at this point, along with some that we've been using for years now in the back to test the reliability in this very salty environment because the salt is aerosolized from the dump buckets. So these fixtures have held up well, and we're getting great performance out of them.
Hmm.
But we also do have a natural skylight over that provides natural sunlight over this reef, and in fact is starfire, so it lets UVA through that skylight.
Yeah. I
So
love that you use the most expensive glass possible for the skylight.
yeah,
For
it's
the
funny
demo.
actually. When we started, they incorrectly installed normal panels, and then they ripped those out and added the Starfire back in there to get a little bit of UV light through. This system's all controlled, by the way, with a 0 to 10 controller. So
Hmm.
it is each individual fixture is controllable, including the metal halides. And we have a light sensor on, so when it's sunny out, it dims everything down.
Oh, so neat.
So that helps mitigate some of the seasonality as well as conserve some energy.
Yeah.
So we can go to the next slide.
On that one picture with the lights, do you work on the lights from beneath in a canoe, or do you get to walk across an assembly on top and lift them up and work on them? How does that work?
We use a dinghy, we use a boat,
You do use a
so it's a
boat.
lot of fun.
Yeah.
We can also, because all these fixtures are waterproof, we can
Yeah.
spray them down. So the metal halides
Oh, it's a
are
video.
Lithonia.
Ah.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Can we do this
This
video
is a
for a
little
second?
walkthrough around them.
Thank you. Yeah.
So we're gonna walk around here and see the front of them. That was the LEDs are the black fixtures in the
Yeah,
back
yeah.
there.
I could tell.
And then you walk around front and you get to the metal halides.
And there's those
That
dump
near
buckets.
section is the LED test section that
Yeah.
we installed maybe 8 months ago.
Yeah.
And then the rest of those shiny Lithonia fixtures, or
Right.
sorry, Hubble fixtures are metal halides, and all those are waterproof. So we can spray them down with a hose. We can also get in a little raft and clean
Nice.
everything. So we can go to the next slide here.
Yeah. Oh, there it is.
So the transition to LEDs, I was very concerned about it, to be honest with you. I didn't know how it was going to go. And that's why no one wants to be first. So when you're dealing with light renovations that can cost $250,000 or $500,000 that require board of director approval and can take years to implement, I don't want to just experiment and go all the way in. I want to take my time with this transition. So we're doing a lot of testing with this test section. We've tested the reliability of these fixtures over the course of the last several years. And we don't necessarily want to be cutting edge. We want to make sure that we're using proven, reliable technology.
Yeah.
So the top spectrographs are different depth testing, all the way down to 18 feet, different spectrographs with metal halides, and then the same testing locations with the new max spec flood LED fixtures. So there's a little bit difference in the spectrums, but as you guys are aware, corals are pretty adaptable and able to use a wide variety through their photopigment of different spectral quality fixtures, and they grow just fine. So we haven't actually seen any drop off in growth or anything like that. In fact, the corals probably, if anything, have responded with higher growth. So when we get in the next slide, this is going to be very challenging to read. I don't expect you to be able to see it, especially if you're viewing this presentation from a small phone. Yeah, you're not going to see that. But
I do.
the metal halides have very low power readings, and this is done at a time when the pictures were taken when all the lights were on, but the readings are from a time when only the test section was running. So there's no skylight. This was done pre-sunrise.
Yeah.
And we were getting several hundred micromoles, 300 micromoles per meter squared per second, all the way to the bottom of that system when these LEDs were running at 100%.
Yeah.
Whereas the metal halides, we were just getting typically even up closer to top 50 to 100 micromoles. Now,
Yeah.
of course, when the sunlight, natural sunlight occurs, we can get 800 micromoles all the way to the bottom
Okay.
because it's such a powerful. The sun is the most powerful lighting system you can get. So it's a little bit unfair with that. But
It's a completely different technology. So yeah, you're going to have different changes. And you're going to have variations too, because like when you have the dump bucket dump in water and the surface is cavitating, that's going to change how much it's cloudy temporarily for, so many seconds till it clears up again.
Yeah, and we had to actually get that frequency of dumps down, because if you run it too often, too frequent, it really micro bubbles up and clouds up the water.
Right.
So we did have to play around with that. But you're absolutely right. There are micro bubbles introduced from that system that block things, and of course we're trying to punch light down 18 feet. And
Yes.
I don't know, most of you guys might look through the side of your aquarium through a 6 or 8 foot aquarium, and it can look significantly cloudier through that side view versus the front view. And it's the same thing. We're trying to punch down 18 feet. So some of the light is definitely blocked through that water column. So we can go to the next slide here. This is the filtration system. And again, I can kind of just give you an overview, but I don't expect you to be able to see all the details in this from a small screen. But basically, this was modeled, and Bruce knew how successful home hobbyists were. And we're really at the cutting edge of reef aquarium husbandry going back decades. So we wanted to model that success in a large scaled up public aquarium setting. So the methods that we're using place the burden of the filtration on the protein skimmers. So we have two large RK2 protein skimmers. We add ozone into them. And then that water leaves the protein skimmers and enters a degas tower, which is the equivalent of basically a giant wet dry filter.
Hmm.
And that off gases that ozone so that it's not toxic to the animals as it re enters the aquarium. And then we have a little side stream that goes in through two large Neptune Benson sand filters, basically large pool filters. And inside those, you have a layer of silica sand, and that is almost like a giant filter bag or filter roller, and it filters out the particulates. But we wanted all the water to enter the protein skimmers first, so that the majority of the particulate was filtered out through the protein skimmer
Hmm.
rather than through a mechanical filter where you're running all the clean water through the dirty sand essentially
Hmm.
and can increase nitrates and so forth. So that was the thought anyway behind this, that we have a less efficient way of running the sand filters and we put the burden on the protein skimmers.
Hmm.
And then from there, the water dumps back into the main exhibit. The water is filtered only a couple times an hour. This is very different than you might do in a home aquarium,
Hmm.
where you might have, I remember back when I first started doing it, people wanted a 10 or 20 times turnover through the sump.
Yeah.
We're getting a little bit more reasonable with that turnover rate at this point, but still most home aquariums turn over through their sumps a little bit more.
Yeah, that's
Than,
the thing. We shouldn't. You want more contact time in the filtration, basically, right?
yeah, you're just wasting water. You're causing your sump to be a little bit noisier,
Yeah.
and you're potentially introducing more microbubbles.
Yep.
The reason that's really potentially harmful in a public aquarium setting is that those microbubbles get sucked up into your pump system,
Right.
and it's super high pressure. So just like how humans can get the bends when you're scuba diving,
Yeah.
and you transition different pressure gradients, and the nitrogen gas comes out of solution in your blood. The same thing can happen in fish, and
Hmm.
you can kill lots of fish very quickly if you're not careful. So
Yeah.
we need to watch our turnover rates through the filter system.
Right.
Then just to be responsible in terms of conserving energy too. Smaller pumps are more efficient. So
Hmm.
we can go to the next slide.
Okay.
And then here's a look at our protein skimmers. They're the size of a car. They have their own washdown system.
Yeah.
And then our sand filters are on the right-hand side there.
Hmm.
They are just large Neptune Benson sand filters, and they filter out most of the particulate.
How tall
Uh,
is that? 15 feet?
yeah, you're about right. They're probably about 12 or 15 feet tall.
Wow. Yeah.
And then those get backwashed once a week, where we reverse the flow and send that water down the drain.
Nice.
And that's in fact our water change. We
That
do
is your
about,
water change. That little tiny water change. Yeah. Because you said you
it's
don't do
about
big water
4,000
changes.
gallons a week.
Yeah.
So we can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
This is the degas tower. It doesn't look like much. It's filled. We can't use bioballs in a giant system like this. We use
Right.
Brentwood media, which is kind of like a corrugated or honeycombed material. And then we inject ozone into the PSK, and then that's degassed through the kind of the trickle effect as it cascades the different levels.
Okay.
And then on top of that, we have redundant ORP controllers to shut the ozone off.
Yeah.
It has different. It's kind of our safety net.
Hmm.
And then on top of that, we perform daily oxidant water quality testing to ensure that we're not putting that potentially harmful chemicals back into the water. So we can go to the next slide here. And believe it or not, this is our calcium reactor. This is a modified sand filter that holds a couple pellets worth of extra coarse carob sea arm media. This is replaced. We replaced about a pellet every year. At this point, as the system grows, we're going to have to replace more and more.
Hmm.
We have a pH control system. We use huge cylinders of liquid CO2 that knock the pH in the system down to 6.2 to 6.5 or so. And then that's enters back in the rate of about 2 gallons per minute back into our system. So most people just trickle a little bit drips of
Yeah.
calcium reactor effluent. We do 2 gallons per minute, which is a steady stream
Yeah. Yeah.
of water back into back into the system. We also do calcium hydroxide as well, or kalkwasser. Most of our trace element as well as our calcium alkalinity addition comes from in the form of this. We can go to the next slide here.
Okay.
And then we used to do, for phosphate control, we used to have a giant ferric oxide filter that was on the effluent of our calcium reactor because the media itself can introduce a little bit of phosphate. We also used to do lanthanum chloride, which is typical in marine mammal pools in the public aquarium. It's very, very efficient. It causes a chemical reaction between the lanthanum chloride and the phosphate, precipitating out lanthanum phosphate, which we pull out either using protein skimmers or mostly in the public aquarium world, we're using, in this case, we use a sacrificial sand filter. So instead of gunking up our main sand filter, we had a separate sand filter, and that way, if it ruins it or it gets clogged up, it's not our main filter. But people also in smaller scale will use micron bag filters to pull it out. We haven't had to do this recently because we have very close to non-detected phosphate levels. So we do use no current form of phosphate control. The corals do that for us.
Wow, nice.
So we can go to the next slide. And then the maintenance. So nothing fancy here. We use your typical pro scrapers with acrylic blades. And the normal extra strength magic erasers are a great tool. We installed a spray bar as part of our flow system back in 2015, and that blows with eductors directly across that overhead window and keeps most of the debris off the window. That allowed us to reduce our maintenance dives in the system from 7 days a week to 4 days a week. Those 4 days, we put typically 2 divers in the water, and they're just they're cleaning that window. And they love it. These are volunteers, most of them, that do this job. And they are some of our most skilled divers that we have here. And we basically, there's over 100 maintenance diving volunteers that we have. And we've trimmed that list down to about 20 of the ones with the best buoyancy and highest skill set that are able to dive in the system with the delicate live corals in it. So we can go to the next slide.
Oh, it was a video.
Sorry, there's a little video
Dang
there.
it,
And I
I
think
want
I
to
have
see
another
these
one
videos.
coming up next. Yeah, sorry, I forget that most of these are videos. I apologize.
Yeah, I keep wondering if I'm supposed to tap them, but I don't want to throw the screen off to the next one accidentally.
So you can see she's using a suction cup. She doesn't have fins on. Her air is at the surface. And that's a strengthened tending line so that she can actually, in a case of emergency, we can extricate them without having a buddy in the water.
Yeah.
And she can talk in that mask and listen as well with the
That's
headphones.
cool.
So pretty cool little setup. And she has the infinite air supply because we can just swap tanks back and forth.
Right.
So we can go to the next slide.
There you go.
And then we use a vacuum system. So this is affectionately known as the cappuccino maker. It's our giant micron pool filter. And you can't siphon in a system this big because we're fighting gravity. We don't have gravity as our friend.
Right.
So we use a 1 horsepower pump to suck it up, go through a micron filter, and then it re-enters back and recycled back to the exhibit.
Is this a video?
Nope, the next one is though. This is, if you go to the next slide, this is in action. So we have one diver currently on screen cleaning the window. A second diver will come up in a minute. And then we have another diver that's a staff diver that we allow to vacuum. So she's using a hose.
Yeah.
You'll notice it's a very delicate process. It's a lot more difficult than it looks. We're fighting currents.
Right.
We're fighting fish that are biting us.
Oh.
There's about 80 Diadema sea urchins, little landmines around in here.
Yep.
So there's all kinds of stuff in there.
They look like minions.
Yeah, that gives you a little bit better sense of the scale, right?
It totally does. That's awesome.
So you can see they're kind of gliding around. It is a blast. I love diving in here. It's definitely the best dive in Atlanta. All right, so we can go to the next slide. And then here's Mark, what you were talking about earlier.
Your canoe.
This is our version of the canoe. We clean the lights with kind of a 50-50 vinegar, acetic acid / RO water mix. And then we change out the metal halides. We used to when we could get lamps every 6 months with the Hamiltons. but since then it's been pretty challenging. So,
Right.
but yeah, a little boat ride in your system. That's when you know you have a huge system when you can launch a boat in it. Uh,
Yeah, exactly. And your little tiny paddle, I'm sure, right, to paddle around.
Yeah, most of the time we don't really paddle. We'll kind of launch ourselves with using the light fixtures themselves. But in case
Oh,
we drift
yeah.
out in the middle of nowhere, then yeah, we have
Right.
a paddle to kind of
Yeah.
rescue us and bring us back to shore.
Okay.
Uh, we can go to the next slide here,
Yep. Is
and
this
then
video?
this is a video. This is just showing the feed. We feed multiple times a day. Typical food items that you might feed at home: mysis, Pacifica krill, um,
They look like
nori.
big nuggets. Are they frozen still, and the fish are eating them frozen, or are they still cooked?
Most of the stuff is not frozen. There's also gel that's mixed into it, which is kind of
Ah,
like a vitamin mix.
yeah.
So all kinds of stuff. And then that's for the teleos, the bony fish. The
Right.
elasmos, like the blue spotted rays, we
Yes.
target feed, and we do annual physicals that we take weights, and then we give them a percentage of that weight along with the appropriate vitamins.
Yeah.
To ensure they're getting the best diet possible. We can go to the next slide. I know we're running a little bit tight in time.
Yeah.
So all of our corals that are added to the system have to go through quarantine. This is one of our quarantine systems.
Hmm.
It's nothing fancy. It's just very basic system.
Yep.
This one at the time had T5 lighting. The corals go in there for about 45 days. They might undergo dips or baths depending on what the source is,
Yeah.
how risky of an introduction it is, what we're seeing. And at a minimum, it's 45 days. Sometimes we go significantly longer than that,
Yeah.
depending on how comfortable we feel with the particular shipment.
Yeah.
So we find all kinds of stuff. You can go to the next slide. This one is a video. This is an acropora eating flatworm. I know everyone's
Oh,
gone
look at
crazy
it go!
screen.
Wow.
These little guys can be a nightmare, but they're fortunately relatively easy to treat in baths, but they are egg laying, so we have to do multiple treatments. I have found all kinds of crazy stuff. Sea spiders. We just got a confiscation
Yeah.
of corals in that had lovely nudibranchs on them.
Hmm.
We have seen anything and everything. So that's why you want to deal with that in a quarantine system.
I just want to
Once
say.
everything clears, it goes into either a propagation system or
Mhm.
into the main exhibit itself,
Mhm.
depending on what our goals are. And you can go to the next slide here.
Okay, I was just gonna say that video looked really fast. You guys couldn't see at the bottom of the screen. That was a 45-second time lapse. So it moved in 1 second, but in real life it moves very slowly.
Yeah, and you can see the bite marks on that
Yeah.
acropora, and
Right.
I kind of angered it. That's why it moved away.
Got
I was
it.
taking the
Wow.
pipette to kind of force it to move so that
Oh,
people can
nice.
see it.
Okay.
This is one of our propagation system. It's a 1,000-gallon system. You can see a technique that I stole from the Coral Restoration Foundation,
Yeah.
the coral trees that are hanging there.
Hmm.
It works well in an aquarium setting, though it is difficult to reach the corals in the bottom.
Yeah.
We have since kind of moved away from it, but you can get an idea of how we propagate
Yeah.
large amounts of corals. From there, we take trimmings, and those trimmings go into the main display. We plant in clusters,
Hmm.
and those clusters fuse into monster colonies very quickly.
Right.
It is way easier to plant small frags than it is to plant large colonies.
Yeah.
So that's typically what I do. This system is lit with it. I just switched it over. It has 16 Radion XR30s, and it's got a giant MRC calcium reactor, a giant MRC protein skimmer,
Hmm.
two HydroWizard ECM63s plus three Ecotech Vortec MP60s for water flow,
Wow.
plus an Abyss return pump. So crazy, massive amounts of flow in there.
Right.
We can go to the next slide here, and you can see us when we plant these things. We take the corals down in trays.
Look at
We're
that.
using our surface supply gear,
Hmm.
and then we plant using underwater epoxy. And you can see a good glimpse of
Hmm.
that cluster technique. You can also see we added a coral. This coral was known as blob marley, which was a giant leather coral, and we added that to the system as well. When we do that, we'll bring we have an underwater electric drill.
Hmm.
You can also use a pneumatic drill and drill into the rockwork. We'll embed little pegs,
Hmm.
and then from there you can kind of peg it in just like you might with an artificial coral. But you want to make sure with that epoxy, just like your home epoxy, you want to make sure that it pretty much stays on its own, and the epoxy will harden. This stuff doesn't harden quickly like home aquarium epoxy,
Yeah.
it takes typically about 30 minutes to an hour. If you used home aquarium epoxy one, you need 1 million sticks of it. This stuff is way stickier than the home aquarium stuff.
Yeah.
I typically use, I have Z Spar up there, but I typically use Fix It nowadays.
Hmm.
And it gives us a lot more working time, so we can just take giant Ziploc bags of the stuff down and work with it for several minutes before it hardens up on us.
Yeah.
Typically, we'll shut off the water flow to the system when we're doing this to give it a chance to cure. But
Hmm.
it's awesome. I've loved going down there. And typically, we will also keep a backup copy of these corals in our propagation system so that if anything were to go wrong with our corals that we add to the main display, that we have a backup.
Hmm.
That's the rest of my presentation. I'm happy. We might have a couple minutes if you have any questions, Mark, or I wasn't able to load the chat, so I don't know if there was anything in the chat that I can help respond to.
There was a couple of questions, but we're running out of time. Let's see if we can throw one on here very quickly. You talked about the acroporian flatworm, and so one person just wanted to know, is the camel shrimp a confirmed solution to get rid of them? Back shrimp.
I cannot confirm that because I've never used them before, but
Okay.
that sounds like one solution. I will note that there's ways to deal with acroporian flatworms even if they get into your main system. So of course you want to do everything to try to prevent them from getting in your aquarium. But a lot of times if you just turkey baster them, the fish will pick the adults as they fly off the coral. You
Yeah.
can also use a power head for this. In really big systems like ours, we don't have them as far as I know in our system, but you can also spray them off with a little bit of fresh water, which will dislodge them, and then the fish will eat them from there. So there are ways to live with these things. We did have red bugs. When I first got there in 2010, we did have red bugs, Tagastes, in that system.
Yeah.
At that time, there was hardly any acropora in there, so I was able to pull them out, all the acropora colonies out,
Hmm.
and then dip all those corals with interceptor like you might do at home.
Right.
Red bugs are one of the more favorable pests to get because
Yeah.
they are live bearing, so you can just do 1 or 2 dips and they're gone,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then leave the system without a host. So we're able to deal with those. As far as I know, there's no coral pest in the system at this point in time. Knock on wood.
Right. 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 All right. Well, I think I'm just gonna kind of wrap because we're on the 11 o'clock hour. So, hey, listen, thank you so much for coming on. I loved seeing some of what's going on there in the filtration process, how it works. The video clips were fantastic. Thank your team for that. And I look forward to coming to visit your facility again. I mean, it's on my list. I just need to get on a plane and just do it already. But
Yeah, come by anytime. We'll give you the tour.
yeah, no, again, but this time I'll film and release it. I have to. I'm so bad because I get so much footage. I get a little overwhelmed. I'm like, oh, I got to sit down and edit through this, and it's a tough one for me to do. But no, this was great. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. I'm gonna switch this back to just me, and I believe somehow you can just go bye-bye. And thank you again so much for coming on to Markna.
My pleasure.
All right. Okay, guys, we are on the 11 o'clock hour where it's time to get into our next one, which we have to kind of set up really quickly. I'm going to throw a video up right now to give us a cushion. And so let me do this and then do one of these. Let's see. Take this. And you can't see it, which is good. It means I'm doing it right. I'm learning. I'm going to put this on here. And lose that. And I think we are just going to hit play. And then see what happens here. Is it going to play? I'm working on it. Ah, there we go. So and then I've got to talk to you guys about the raffle. Actually, let me pause this. The raffle system is so complicated in how it all came together. You would think it's so easy. Companies contributed stuff that you guys could buy tickets for. All the money that you use to buy raffle prize tickets is going to Coral Restoration Foundation minus whatever fees there are for doing transactions. But I mean, every dollar is going to them. None of it goes to Markna. Matter of fact, we had to make sure there was no chance of any kind of issue. So WAMUS, the club in DC, the Washington Area Marine Aquarium Society, stepped up. They are in charge of, because they are a nonprofit club, so they are receiving the funds through this raffle system. They will then cut a check to CRF at the end of the event when they know how much it is, and that'll be that. The raffle system itself is a cart system. You go find all the things you want, you add them to your cart, and then I guess it takes you to the point where you pay and you buy that batch of tickets, just as if you were buying a bunch of gear from Mila's Reef. And you'll just pick the prizes, and there's lots. There's about, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I think there's like 80 prizes to go through. Remember, I just wanted one an hour for 24 hours yesterday until 4 in the morning. 4 of us total worked on building this raffle software that we only enabled less than 48 hours ago. It was a real challenge to learn how to use it. We really hope it'll work well. And we are raising money for the Coral Restoration Foundation. That's the bottom line. The fact that you win stuff is really cool, but when you buy tickets, you are helping them with their efforts to plant more corals. And the prizes will be selected at the end of the event. So it makes us kind of like MACNA, because when you go to MACNA, there's a big raffle on Sunday. So we are going to remind you about the raffle every single hour, and then you're going to go ahead at the end, find out who won, because it's all handled by the software. It literally will just figure everything out, and everyone will get emailed if they won. And it's going to be at 9 in the morning tomorrow morning, so you have a general idea when to tune in if you're still alive and with me and hanging in there. But that's how we believe it's going to work. We really hope it's going to do exactly what it's designed to do. We've gone over the software so many times trying to make sure it's right. When you're setting up your purchase, make sure that you fill in your name, your address, your email address, your phone number, all the things, because I have to ship you these prizes, and I need to have all that. And it'd be great not to contact you and say, what is your address? What else can I tell you about the raffle? I felt like there was something else that was on my mind. Well, I have lots of opportunities to say it again and again. So I'm going to go ahead and put this video up. I'm not going to end the stream yet, and the next one's going to start. It's going to be with Justin Spog, and he is a local coral seller here, and I want to talk to him about his business. So I'm going to push this.
We are dreaming in the dark. We are nothing more than dust. Search but you stay lost. We are reaching for the stars, but we're making this too hard. And I wonder where you are. Mysterious, that's the part you always show. 'Cause you're too curious. Maybe you should take it slow. Mysterious, that's the part you always show. 'Cause you're too curious. Maybe you should take it slow. We are dreaming.